Hi everyone, this is Demo Gonzalez again. Just wanted to give you an update for January. It's been quite a turnaround. You guys are going to like your January statements. We went from December where everybody thought the economy was going to go over a cliff to January where we had a huge turnaround. A lot of it was because of the Fed basically making a U-turn. And so today I want to just show you some math of how the market works, because I think once we get a good understanding of this, it's going to help make a lot of sense to what we're seeing with the market and how some of the current events could affect the math. And so enjoy. It's not as boring as it sounds. I think you'll all enjoy it. Thanks. Okay, so I call this the math behind the market, and it's for the S&P 500. And so let me just do a quick explanation of what you're looking at here. First, you got today's date. The market's just closing now, so I put in a value of 2,700. And so it's the first day of February. So when you figure out what the market value is, you basically are looking at two things. You're looking at what the earnings per share is going to be for the S&P 500 and what the multiplier, or oftentimes known as the PE ratio, is going to be. Now, the average PE ratio over the last 25 years has been about 16, so that's what I got right here. So last year's earnings per share, as you can see here, was 162.28. Now that's an estimate since the fourth quarter is technically not done being reported yet, but it's a pretty close estimate. And there is earnings per share growth for 2019 of 5%. Now I'll show you this real quick. You can see here that these earnings numbers, the projections for 2019, have been going down quite a bit. Earlier in October, we were as close to 10, and it's been going down and down and down, down to 5.6 according to Zacks. Now, I used the number that is closer to 5 because I averaged out some other research analysts. And they are a little bit more pessimistic even than Zacks. But when you look at 162 times 5%, 1.05, you actually get 170. And so if you multiply 170 times that 16.1 multiple, you get where the S&P should be by the end of the year. Now the number here is 2743. Now we're currently at 2,700. So if you do the math, 2,700, 2,743, that is only about 1.5% or so. When you add the current yield of the S&P 500, which is 2.1, you get a total return for the next 12 months of 3.72. Now you might think, well, that doesn't sound very good. Well, you have to remember January where the S&P's up almost 8% already. So we've had a nice comeback from the December doldrums. But what I'm looking at here is if nothing really changes from what we see as of right now, the S&P may only make about 3.72. Now the reason I did this is I want to show you what could happen if things change and the drama that can create in the market. So I showed you that chart where earnings growth was going down, the projections for 2019. Well, what if they don't? What if they're actually not going to be as bad as some of the analysts are saying? What if it's closer to 6 or 7? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this number to 6. And if I change that number to 6, you can see the S&P is going to end up at 2769, and then you do the math, and we can make another percent or so in the S&P. If I change that number to 7, and we weren't at 7 that long ago, just last year we were at 7, that can give us another boost in what we can make for the rest of the year. The other thing that we can maybe change here, and I'll change this back to 5, is the multiple. Right now the 16.1, that is the average. What if we actually get some good news? I mean, there's a lot of things out there right now, right? We got the China trade talks. We got Brexit. We got potential shutdowns. We got a lot of political unrest here in the U.S. with the Mueller probe and everything else. So what if some of those things actually get settled? Now, I know that's a big what if, but right now the market is pricing in China progress, China trade deal progress, but not anything big. We're also looking at Brexit not being a hard Brexit, but still very confused about what's going to happen there. As far as the government unrest and shutdown, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty priced in there, and I don't think that we're going to probably have another shutdown. It looks more likely that Trump will probably use some sort of an executive order to build his wall, and that will all get, fought over in the courts. But at least there won't be another shutdown. And maybe, what if there's a Mueller probe, that ends this year? So we could be looking at potentially multiples that could go up from here, because I think we're at a place now with the Fed where they're going to pause for the rest of the year. Maybe that won't happen, but that's kind of what's being priced in now. So even if we can go from 16, which is where I'm showing the average, to 17, you can see how that makes a pretty big difference. 9.4%. Now let's say maybe the Mueller probe doesn't finish, that's still hanging over, and all we get is maybe some progress on the China trade deal. Maybe that's a little bit better than we thought. The Chinese do seem pretty anxious to get something done, and we only get 16.5 in the PE. That still gets us another 6% or so in S&P 500 earnings. See how that works? It's, believe it or not, a lot of it comes down to math. The hard thing is knowing what these two numbers are going to be, what those earnings growth numbers are going to be, and what the multiple for the market's going to be. I always like to look at that historical average and look at what the consensus estimates on earnings growth is. And so if right now everything stays the same, we might make another 3 or 4%. This is why you're going to see me starting to go a little bit more conservative with some of the portfolios. But I do think there is a good chance that some of these things that I mentioned could be a positive surprise, and we could end up with a little bit more. So I'm not completely abandoning ship. But you can see now why I'm getting a little bit more hesitant and a little bit more cautious, going more to neutral. So hope this helps. And let me know if you have any comments or questions. Forward this along if you like. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. And the last thing I want to leave you with is what's called the treasure principle. And the best way to explain it is just to read the verse from Matthew 6:19 through 21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So remember, it's all about relationships and friends and loving your neighbor. Have a great one, guys. And by the way, if you like the music, that music is from my son, Sam. He created it himself. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.